welcome to my show Conversation with Priya. I'm your host Priya Mishra, and today we have a very different guest. He is an MC, conference chairperson, and also master moderator. He has been helping a lot of events and actually creating a memorable movement for the conferences and the attendees, for the people who are joining in hands with this kind of professional events. Luke Hannan is one of the Australian most experienced and engaging professional conference and event MC. So before I tell you too much about him, I would like you to help me to welcome Luke Hannan.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. Great to be here.
Pleasure. So I really admire your journey. I have seen like you are coming from a complete different, I'm too, but you coming from a complete different industry to the industry you are into now. And I'm really looking forward to hear your story. What made you to start this particular journey, entrepreneurial journey, being MC and like helping events? How that all that is started? I'm really excited to hear that.
Priya, thanks. It's great to be here. And it's a great question. I get asked that one a little bit. And hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you sharing our story today. I get asked quite a bit, how did I become an MC from risk management? And for those listening in, risk is a very broad topic, broad industry.
Sure.
There's operational risk, the risk of things going wrong. There's fraud risk, the risk of someone stealing your money. There's credit risk, the risk of someone not paying you back. There's market risk, which is where you might buy equities or shares. The market moves in a way that you've unanticipated and you lose money. There's interest rate risk. So a lot of banks take on interest rate risk when they fix a home loan. They need to fix that particular, that you lend $1 million at 5%, and the bank needs to then go and borrow that somewhere else at a fixed rate, otherwise they're taking interest rate risk. My particular brand of risk was credit risk. So I started my career back in the 90s at the Commonwealth Bank in collections, actually, as a debt collector.
Wow.
And that sounds very baseball bat, very forceful, but the magic of collections is listening. Because everyone has a story. And so the collections I was doing was the more aged accounts. So these were 5 or 6 months behind in payment. And quite often the first question I would ask is why? Why are you behind in payment? Human beings, which we are, don't generally change behavior without a reason. And so when I would collect on somebody or ring them up, if they'd been paying perfect and then had just stopped, something has happened. People don't just decide to stop paying their credit card or their personal loan or their home loan for no reason. And so I started in credit as a listener. And probably the first life lesson I learned is you're not the first person to do something. In most cases, let's face it. I mean, there was the chap that did the 4-minute mile. He was the first person. Now 20,000 people have done it. He was first. There was Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Aldrin, who were the first 2 people on the moon. They were first. But many have done that since. The point there is listen, look, learn about what's around you. When I started in collections, there was a plethora of people doing great work on the phones. And so I was able to listen to the things that these people said and learn and develop. So it's always interesting to find out what other people are doing. So from collections, I went into lending, which is the other side of the credit cycle. And it's amazing how much money people have when they want to borrow from a bank and how little they have when you're trying to collect on them. So that was interesting. And then once I'd done lending for a long period of time, held quite a large delegation. In other words, I could approve loans up to $250,000 for cars or personal loans for a bit less. Once I'd done that, then I decided to get into portfolio management. And that's where you make the decisions to shape the portfolio at a macro level, because certain types of credit are done very individually. So a large commercial deal, for example, will be assessed by 1 or more lenders at the same time, but it's a person. However, a bank might get 6,000 credit card applications a month. That's 200 a day. You just don't have the manpower to look at these individually. So we set policies and rule sets to approve or decline en masse. And it's a bit of a utilitarian approach in that you do what's best for the majority, because that's what works en masse. And so then I'd been in credit and collections and risk for 17 years, since the 90s. I did a decade at Citibank, eight or 9 years at Westpac, But back in 2018, and this is getting back to your question, how did I become an MC?
Yeah.
I met a guy who's now my coach, Andy Fell, and I did an offsite training day, and it was a leadership for first-time leaders. I was a leader, I was managing a team, and I thought, right, I need to be a manager, I need to learn. Deep down inside, I knew I didn't want to be a banker or a CEO.
Right.
And the reason for that is at Citi, I was on an executive leadership program for 2 years. It's called their MA program, the Management Associate program. There's thousands of applicants. They chose half a dozen of us, and I was lucky enough to be chosen. And during that 2-year period, my wife and I had our first 2 children, and my mum passed away. And I think that gave me perspective on life.
Right.
And it was at that point, when someone passes away, it sort of changes your view on life to a certain extent. And it was there I realized, okay, I don't want to be a CEO. I don't want to be a senior manager giving up my life for a career in banking. And make no mistake, I love banking. So it's March 2018. I'm meeting with this guy, Andy, who, as I said, is now my coach. And Andy said to me, he's like, he said during the afternoon, he's like, Luke, mate, what are you doing in risk? And it wasn't a condescending, challenging, sarcastic question. He was coming from the angle through the lens of, I sort of see so much potential in you, but I don't know this is the right place for you to maximize that. Or I can see you've got boundless energy and love doing so many different things. Is risk the right place for you? And that got me thinking. And I didn't have the answer to Andy's question on the day, but I did leave there thinking, gee, I don't know what I want to do next, but whatever it is, it's going to be amazing.
Right.
It's going to be amazing. And a few months later, Thursday, the 10th of May, it was 2018, I was at Westpac hosting a charity event. And I'd done this event for the San Filippo Children's Foundation, and we did a lot of work for them. One of our leaders had some close friends, their children have San Filippo. Basically, San Filippo is a rare genetic disorder which affects about, I think, 1 in 70,000 kids. And the devastating thing is these children never make it to adulthood.
Wow.
So it's a childhood illness. It affects their brain. I forget the details because it was 5 or 6 years ago, but it's really, really bad. So we raised a lot of money. And I'm doing this charity event Thursday, the 10th of May, and I'm on stage, and Priya, as clear as I'm speaking to you now, the thought came into my head, this is it. This is it. As I'm holding a microphone, clearly I didn't say it, but I thought it. And what that meant, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do in life. I'm supposed to be an MC. And so that was kind of the revelation where I had realized, I think this is what I'm supposed to do in life. And looking back, it kind of makes sense in that when I was younger, I played footy, and I'll tell the story a bit. I was cleaning up my house recently, and I found my 1989, I was 8 years old, I'm 42 now. I found my year 8-year-old, under 8's football yearbook where the coach writes, comments in there.
Right.
And playing is a loose term for what I did. I played on the side in the dirt with my cars while the other kids played footy. The coach wrote, gee, something along the lines of, when we found out Luke's legs went as fast as his mouth, we knew we had a great hooker on our hands, because I always talked like I would never shut up.
Right.
And other things, like I'd read my kids' books at night, and I'd be like, Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. Like I'd put on these funny voices and do voiceovers. So it's funny in hindsight that I think I was always meant to be a speaker. And throughout my career in banking, and I did 17 years by the time I had the enlightenment, discovered I wanted to be an MC, and resigned just this year after 22 years. And I'd always loved public speaking, be it running a training course, chairing an important meeting, speaking to 1,000 people at Citibank. That was like a highlight for me. And most people hate public speaking, whether it's the fear of failure, the fear of humiliation, nerves in front of a big crowd. Maybe they're not a subject matter expert. We'll talk more on that because I do public speaking coaching now. But I'd always loved it. It was like the highlight of my life. And even to this day, having done over 400 events, every time I take the stage or start a meeting, it's just like that Christmas morning feeling. It's like, how good is this? Right. So I've truly found my passion in life, and it's a real privilege to be a host. But that is the story from risk to MC.
Very, very interesting story. And you're right. There are a lot of people are not able to actually stand up and speak. I mean, for me, when interested in doing public speaking, especially more of a professional speaking, because I have been always on a stage. I was a stage artist. I never give up on a stage. I was approved artist. Back then, there was only one channel in India. That time I was already approved artist, I was a classical dancer and everything. So it's just that public, when I go to the public, I feel like more of a enlightened, it's a different divine feeling for me when I stand on the stage. So people say, oh, everybody these days are trying to be speaker, but for me, it was naturally from the childhood. I was on a stage since I was 10 years old, right? So, Indian classical dancing, I spent 9 years learning, mastering it,
Wow.
That's how you get in India, like Indian dancing and Indian classical music and Indian classical artistry is very tough to get into, like it takes years of meditation, I would say. So, and that was like when I was always in IT, when I started my career in 1995 as a marketer, but that time marketing had not enough money. So I was a programmer and I shifted to that. I can feel, I mean, me and you have a very similar journey, if I would say. I moved to the IT and then I was thinking, I always keep questioning, what am I doing here? Why am I sitting behind the desk? All the time I was questioning it. And then I did the Gallup test and all when I wanted to change my career, in 9 years ago. I did a lot of psychometric tests to find out what exactly I'm looking for. I just didn't started like, okay, I want to do this, I did a lot of testing, question myself, revalidate myself. And I feel like this is what I like it. And that's why I'm very passionate about. And I always believe passion makes a lot of difference when you work in
absolutely.
Right? If you're passionate about it, naturally, there will be so many good value you will bring to the table when you are working with your client or, whosoever is your stakeholder working with you. So I really admired when people come from the passion background, to be honest. Loving your job is very, very important for me, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think passion's an interesting word, right? It's the ikigai, the Japanese ikigai. What do you love? What can you get paid for? What does the world need? And I forget the fourth one. But at the intersection of those in the middle is passion. And for me, that's what public speaking is. It make no mistake, stepping away from a 22-year career in finance, and I mean, well over 6 figures in terms of a salary. And that goes from that to zero. So you need to sort of make sure that, yeah, absolutely, right. But I'd been hosting now for 5 years, and I built my business to the stage where it was time. It was time. Probably another interesting thing is corporate life is good, but I found that you get boxed into the corporate employee mold. And make no mistake, I loved my 22 years in banking and finance, and I truly believe in the value of the banking industry.
Either.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a beautiful life, but at the same time, it didn't give the fulfillment we were looking for. And that brings to my next question. Do you think the corporate should actually do something about it, giving more fulfillment to the employee? I mean, there are some companies that started looking into that angle. But still, do you think it's enough? And do they think they should give more opportunity and not box people, give them the opportunity they love so that there will be less migration towards, keep jumping here and there?
It's a tough question. My opinion would be that there are many different types of people and none are better or worse than the other. And as a leader in finance, you're always going to have your individuals who just want to work 9 to 5.
Yeah.
And when I was younger, I never understood that. I'm like, you have such an opportunity. Why don't you try and ascend to these levels? But I truly believe the 9 to 5ers who just come in, do maybe just a bit more than the bare minimum, but do what they have to, then go home. From the outside, that can look lazy, non-committal. But it's not. It's not those things. I truly believe those people have their life in order because they're not living to work. They don't waste waste is the wrong word. They don't spend so much time at work that they miss out on their kids' things. These people have balance in their life because they know that work is a means to an end.
Yeah.
So there's pros and cons for that. But the point is, there's going to be the segment of people that are just going to come in and do what they've got to do and then go home. And you need those people because they're generally hard workers. And think about it, they've got their life in order. Like, as I mentioned, when you're younger, it's harder to look at that from more of a subjective view. But I think as you get older, you realize that everyone has their own choice. Then there are others who are the go-getters, the trailblazers, the climbing the corporate ladder, so to speak. And then, of course, you've got the people in the middle, and then you've got the 1%ers who are going to be the CEOs. So the organization, I believe, as it stands, meets the needs of those different types of individuals who all add value in their own particular way. What I would say is that I just wonder what office work looks like in 50 years or in 100 years. Because if you think back 20 or 30 years, we went from, I mean, our parents, right, the baby boomers as they're known, who are all sort of retiring now or have retired, they were the generation where you tended to have one or maybe two companies for your whole life.
Right.
For your whole life. And think about the impact that's had to the economy. Because when I left City, my pay went up by like 40 or 50%. Because when you stay at the same company, they don't have to pay you as much as they'd have to pay someone off the street. Right. So the fact that people's elasticity to change companies over the past decade or two has completely shifted, organizations need to pay more for staff. Yeah. Which means the product prices and that go up and their margins get compressed, right? So without going too much off topic, I just wonder what the future of the firm looks like. I don't have the answers. Do I think it's more flexible? Yes. Is there more intrapreneurship and entrepreneurship? Yes. My side hustle, my MC business, which started 5 years ago, was welcomed by the team at Westpac. And Westpac and I did a lot of work together inside Westpac. Now, that was strictly on a volunteer basis because I'd always say Westpac was good enough to remunerate me every fortnight handsomely. Therefore, I'm prepared to offer my services internally at no extra cost because it just doesn't seem right billing your employer who pays you already for work that you kind of do when you're on the clock anyway, right? So the future of the firm, I don't know, but I do see a world where people are a lot more able to add small chunks of value elsewhere. Arguably, apart from contracts and social media, I would ask the question, what's stopping someone today working two jobs, one at CBA and one at Westpac at the same time?
Yeah.
You know, if they don't post it on LinkedIn,
I mean, people are calling it's illegal to do the moonlight situation, but it is increasing because it's getting harder and harder to run the family by one person. And if second party decided to look after the children and all, it's not easy. So moonlight situation is happening.
Absolutely.
You know, like it or not, there are a lot of people secretly working on different angle. I was listening at TED Talk, and it says that, you know, the future is gonna be like 10 minutes to half an hour contract you will be getting. Like you work half an hour at one place to do something, then you go to there. So this job market is completely shifting, and it is gonna shift. Like look at the industrial era till now. You know, it's completely changed. I remember when 2000 Y2K issue was coming, people will say this will go and that will go, and then people had that panic attack for their whole computer things. Now software engineers are actually replacing the clerks, which was my father time, you know, clerk situation. Now you don't hire clerk, you hire more computer oriented work. Recently ChatGPT came, so Deloitte says like we are looking for now smart is like super workforce, they are calling it. So super workforce is like something you can do the human as well as AI based work. So already shifting, we can see the shift in our lifetime, you know, in my
I think so.
35 years of workforce I have been, you know, I can see there are a lot of shift happen. And if you're not adopting to that, it's going to be really hard to survive. But if you'll adopt to it, you will thrive. You know, that's what my understanding is. Coming back to our original discussion, like, you know, you are in event industry, and you can see there was after 2020, it's a huge shift happen in the event industry. What do you think about where this future is going to go?
Yeah, one more thing on banking. Ross McEwen from NAB came out last week and said he wanted all these executives to be back in the office. I think it was 5 days a week. And I don't know, I only read the headline. I didn't read the full article, and I didn't read Ross's statement, so I can't quote it verbatim. But that's an interesting angle, isn't it? Because having everyone back in the office is good. And I truly believe that there's power to being in the office. In my opinion, one thing Westpac could have done better during the post-COVID era was bringing people back strategically. And what I mean by that is there's not enough desks to bring everyone back anymore. I don't think any organization has enough desks. Even pre-COVID, they were hot desking and so on and so forth. So I don't think anyone's got the floor space to bring everyone back. But what they could have done better, and again, this is on the opposite side of flexibility, so it's a double-edged argument. Perhaps they could have said, we are going to get the whole department. So my team was transformation delivery projects, right?
Yeah.
They could have said this whole segment, these 100 people, the second Tuesday of every month is your day in the office. You have to come in that day. And the reason that's important is because what actually happened, and I'm sure most people can empathize with this, is we're brought back into the office 2 or 3 days a week, but we end up working remotely from the office.
Yeah.
So you're just Zoom meeting all day from your desk, which defeats the purpose, because the purpose of being together is collaboration. So what I think needs to happen, and I don't know whether industry was ready for this, was you almost need to strip out the offices and completely change the spaces to be less workstation, more collaboration. More meeting rooms, more sit-down areas, more whiteboards, more war rooms, more things like that. Because I'm unsure that many managers and leaders, and I don't believe those terms are interchangeable. There's a big difference between a manager and a leader. I don't believe many managers were ready to manage a team based on what they were doing, as opposed to how often you saw them and how many meetings they showed up to. And for me, what you said about the 10-minute, the half-an-hour contract, that is the future of work. The future of work is you are called in to do a very specific role, because if your role can be taught in 1 or 2 weeks, it's going to be automated. If you can learn everything about your role in 2 weeks, forget it. It's going to be automated sooner rather than later, in most cases, right? In most cases.
Right.
So it's the critical thinking and the ability to discuss, to disagree. I believe as a society, and your Jordan Petersons and your Ben Shapiro's of the world would support and suggest this as well. We've lost the ability, or we are losing the ability to disagree with one another.
Yeah. We are always trying to be politically correct.
Yes, that's exactly right. This is my opinion, and this is why I believe it is correct. Now, that doesn't mean I'm right, and I am open to you coming up with something different, but let us have an adult discussion. And it can be about gender, it can be about sexuality, it can be about any number of topics. Let's have an open, mature discussion without the fear of retribution. And it should never come to name calling, because we need to be mature and adult enough to take a step back and say, you know what? Priya's viewing this through a different lens. And that doesn't mean I'm wrong, but maybe the lens through which I'm viewing this problem needs to expand, or maybe I need to consider different perspectives, or maybe I can work with Priya. It's the Stephen Covey thing, right? Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So I believe that human interaction, that collaboration, that clash, that learning, that's missing. And so I think the future works.
That's why I believe that, productivity is actually going very linear. It's not going, the way we were creating the ripple effect. It was okay to have an argument and discussion. It doesn't mean we become enemy, as long as we are not doing, criticizing, inappropriate ways, if I say. But you don't need to be always politically correct at the same time, no matter what you do. And I do believe that there should be an open environment for moonlight as well, in case you want to explore other opportunity. By having the bread and butter putting on the table, because you have to look after the family at the same time. There are so many geniuses cannot go and explore their passion because they have to put food on the table, and they said, oh, I don't have a time, or I cannot do because I have legal consequences against it. So
That's right.
I would say if given the opportunity, company will more open for this, then I think it will be a better opportunity for people. I mean, in my company, I am open for moonlight as long as what I monitor, productivity. See, not everybody can do multiple job and can be equally productive. And if you are not
That's right.
equally productive, I can understand the employer perspective because they are paying you a good amount of money. They are expecting the result. If you cannot deliver what they are expecting for you, given the time frame, it's not about when you deliver, how quick you deliver, so that they will increase their profit margin. If company is there for profit, like it or not, the company is open for business, means money,
Oh, yeah.
right? If no profitability, there is no business. So you have to, I mean, employee also have to understand the employer perspective, and the employer also have to understand the employee perspective. But I'm open for moonlight situation. I'm open for people to explore the opportunities, but at the same time, as long as they're not compromising the outcome they are supposed to be giving on the given amount or agreed amount.
Yeah, compromise is an interesting thing. And I think firms in Australia, and we'll get back to your events question in a minute, but there's a great book, James Dyson's book on invention. Now, Dyson is a privately owned company. The Dyson family still own Dyson, so the vacuum cleaners, the hair dryers and stuff. And that gives him tremendous flexibility to do what he believes is right. Not what's going to be profitable, not what's going to provide return to shareholders to maintain the capital buffers and so on that they've got. He can make decisions based on what he and his leadership team feel is the right thing to do. Now, clearly it's impossible to unwind all of the ASX companies, and the capital that flows in helps them grow. So there's pros and cons about being privately owned and not.
Yeah.
However, it's just an interesting thing where it's not that large organizations are slaves to the shareholders, but to a certain extent, it is important to make a good return. Because if the owner's equity flies out, if the share price tanks, well, then that creates other issues as well, right? Now, back to your question on events. So COVID was an interesting time for me. My business grew significantly during COVID. I started doing sporting events and conferences. I don't do weddings, and I was very clear on my purpose. I have an MBA from UTS, so I studied business, and I mean, 17 years in banking, management associate at Citi. I can network well, and I know my way around. But I'm also acutely aware what Luke Hannan's value proposition is, and sorry for talking in the third person, but I know what I'm good at, and I know what I'm not. Now, the threat of substitutes as a wedding MC is extremely high because the barriers to entry are extremely low.
Right.
It's very easy to become a wedding MC. Now, some may say it's very easy to become a corporate MC, but I would suggest, do you have the experience? Have you spent time in a CEO's office? Have you presented to APRA? Have you presented to ASIC? How long have you worked in a corporate industry? Because if you don't understand the way corporate operates, and if you haven't presented to people at that level, it's going to be a much steeper learning curve. Hence, the barrier to entry is a lot higher.
Yeah.
Whereas for a wedding MC, and some of my best friends are wedding MCs, if you're an amazing speaker and you've got a good idea of scheduling, then perhaps it's a lower barrier to entry. The other thing is the threat of substitutes for a wedding MC is quite high because looking at a wedding as an event, quite often the family's friend who's an amazing speaker and is quite organized, he knows all the in-jokes of the family. He knows their sense of humor. He knows most of the guests. He knows the level on which the family plays. So for some wedding, that individual is going to be much better than a professional MC.
Yeah.
Whereas in the corporate sense, there's so much more at stake at a large day conference. There's a significantly more amount of money at stake in most cases. There's opportunity cost. A lot more can go wrong over a whole day. Therefore, the professional MC comes into it. So back to your question about events, I think COVID was a really interesting time. One thing I think a lot of people in the events, in the conference space did, but some didn't do as well, was realize that as we're doing now, we're producing television right now. We're trying to keep someone's attention on a screen. And that's a very different proposition to keeping people entertained in a plenary with 1,000 other guests, where there's energy, where there's the aura of being at an event. You might have traveled to the Gold Coast or a golf course on a golf course on the Sunshine Coast. There's that element that you can't replicate when someone's in their studio or someone's in their kitchen tuning into your event. So I think the event industry did so well to adapt in such a short period of time, but some people just took their live content and produced that online, just videoed it. And I'm not sure whether that was the best solution because the best keynote speaker in the world is going to struggle to keep your attention on a screen for 80 or 90 minutes. Whereas Barack Obama could have you for hours, right? So I think timing needed to change. My business personally pivoted quite well online, and I started doing a lot of roundtables, a lot of more intimate discussions, which required quite intense understanding and moderation. And then, of course, that went live as we reopened up, and now we're back doing live. Now, has the events industry changed? Yes, it has. I believe there are more options for people, and people, I believe COVID gave a lot of professionals a higher sense of understanding as to what life was like outside of work. And especially those with families, and even those without, leisure time with their friends, with their pets, meditating on their own at home, instead of spending an hour each day transporting. So the COVID shift, I feel, has enlightened a lot of people as to just how good it is to spend extra time with your kids.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm noticing employers are actually panicking, like whether they are working, managers are always questioning employee. It's a different shift now. When you were at workplace, I'm noticing a lot of my friends and colleagues are actually complaining about that my manager create more pressure at work, working at home, than going back to the office. Some people are so much into pressure. They said, I want to go back to office. At least I can go buy a coffee. Here at home, I cannot have a lunch because my manager is pressurizing a lot.
And I think that's where boundaries needed to be set as well. There's a great YouTube video called The Third Space by Dr. Adam Fraser, and I highly recommend that the viewers have a look at it. And what Dr. Fraser talks about is the third space is what you do in between what you do. So the third space for me between work and home was my 40-minute commute where I'd study Czech. My wife's from the Czech Republic, so I'm learning Czech. Or where I'd chill out and listen to some classical piano music. That was my reset. And that was a transition from work to home. But that transition evaporated overnight, and it became the transition between work and home was turning around from the kitchen table to the family. Or for me, walking 15 meters, at most 15 meters, probably 10, from my studio to the kitchen, to the living room. And I think as a society, we struggled a little bit to really draw a line between work and home. And you spoke upon this at lunch. And let's face it, pre-COVID, the lines between work and home were blurred anyway, right?
Yeah.
I think the invent of, first it was the BlackBerry, then it was the smartphone, and then all of a sudden organizations were putting their app and your email on the smartphone. And let's face it, email is super, super, super convenient. However, you're never off. And I just want to touch on something there. So I left banking on the 6th of April this year. The 7th of April, Good Friday, was my last day.
Yeah.
Now, my coach, Andy, said to me, he said, Luke, as my business grew, and I've been hosting professionally for 5 years whilst I was still full-time employed, he said, Luke, you're going to struggle to be a entrepreneur, go get them, grow your business, strive to succeed, while also still trying to stay relevant and contribute with value, because it's really important to me to add value in Westpac, as I was at the time in my corporate role. And I kind of managed both. And I said to myself, right, when my income gets to 20%, when my hosting income gets to 20% of my salary, then I'll go 4 days a week. And then, as it gets to 40%, 3 days a week. And when I'll leave. Now, my income grew to the point where I could have left, but I didn't. And I was doing both. And it's only after I left that my work laptop and phone is just there in my studio. It's getting picked up by a courier. Shout out to my manager who's been really patient. I was going to drop it off, but I haven't. But that laptop is just an object now. That phone is a paperweight. It doesn't, now this is my work phone, my MC phone, and clearly that is now my focus. But not having to focus on that anymore at all, because I'm on a career break, I don't work there anymore, is just so invigorating. It's so I can't think of the word, but it frees you up. Like my mind is clear now. I don't have two different things. And we spoke how you could work for two different companies. I did it for 5 years, and it's not easy, but it's possible. But I feel now that this singular focus is just so liberating is the word I was looking for. Now, the last point I'll make is my partner's from the Czech Republic. We travel to Europe as much as we can. We're going for 6 weeks this year. We went for 6 weeks last year. That still, for me, feels a little bit like it's something I shouldn't be doing, because I was programmed as an employee to work 48 weeks a year, just with 4 weeks leave.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love my career at City. I love working with my partners at City and Westpac and throughout. Make no mistake, I'm not frowning upon that. It was a pleasure and a privilege.
Yeah.
But it did shape me as an employee. Whereas now I'm the CEO of my own life, right?
Yeah.
I'm my own boss.
A lot of people complain about me, like, you were always working. I said, but that's how I am wired to, right?
Yes.
That's how I am wired to do that. I feel happy when I'm at workplace. I'm not wired to go party. I'm not wired to take long leave. That doesn't give me pleasure. I start getting bored if I will be taking too long holiday period. I feel like, what am I doing? Right? How many books I love reading book, but how much? Right? Because my brain is wired to actually solve complicated problems.
Yeah.
If I'm not getting that, psychologically, I'm getting bored, right?
I think that
so finding that right balance is more important, I believe.
Yeah, for me, the wiring is changing. The wiring is changing. I mean, I mentioned that 2012 incident where, 2012 period in my life, 2011, 2012, where I was a management associate at City, and I had a few kids and my mum passed away. That was the first sort of block that was taken out of the foundations.
Right.
And it didn't make the foundations unstable, but it did make me question the solidity of the model I was living under, without getting too philosophical. And I believe that now I'm starting to appreciate the balance more. And I think this time when I go overseas, I'm still working. I'll still be hosting virtual events from a studio in Europe, and that's fine because I love what I do, right? I get to do what I love. But I will, and I have over the past few weeks, genuinely checked out of corporate life. And it's, as I said, liberating is that word I was looking for. It really is just a case of, wow, I found my happiness. And again, I was happy at corporate, and when we do public speaking coaching, one of the key lessons I leave people with, there's two. The first one is that speaking is a journey. Anything in life is a journey. Love, your career, learning to drive, learning a different language. It is a journey, and you never, ever arrive at the destination because you're always learning. Every time I host an event, I'm always learning. So I believe that speaking is a journey and life is a journey, and you're always evolving. The second thing is that, what is communication? It's one person sending a message to another. It's that simple.
Right.
Now, clearly, when you break it down into the message itself, which is what you're going to say, the audience, who you're saying it to, and the delivery, how you say it, well, it gets a bit more complex. And that's where, when I coach and when I run public speaking workshops, we really drill down and focus on that to help people clarify their message, understand their audience, and deliver better.
Yeah.
But the journey, back to the journey, life is a journey. And it's not finite. And for the first 22 years of my life, corporate life that is, I had a fabulous experience learning different things, working with some amazing people in corporate institutions. And they've got an amazing place. But it was my time in Luke's life to take a different step. And a funny thing happened to me, actually. I'm quite how do I say this? I think in terms of music and in terms of movies.
Yeah.
So quite often when someone says something, I relate that to a song. Now, when I went on a career break at Westpac, a certain individual who I love and I've got a lot of time for had been there for so long, and they said, look, we can't guarantee you a job, but as long as I'm here, you'll have a job. You'll always have a job. A week before I left, an email came out. We'd like to thank this person for their 22 years. They moved on, right? Yeah. And so the first thing I did was started playing the Tramps' Disco Inferno, like burn, baby, burn, Disco Inferno, because my platform had just been burned, right? And I think there's something liberating about that as well, that if there was ever any doubt, like, I am now on my own. And I think the lesson in that for the viewers is take a chance. Take a chance. What is the worst thing that can happen? And my coach said this to me because quite often we don't realize. He said, Luke, he said, open up your CV. And my CV, after my career with an MBA and 22 years in finance, in many different roles and project management, isn't the best CV in history, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
And you look at that and you're like, I believe I'm reasonably employable. I'm reasonably employable. So if worst comes to worst, I can go and add a significant amount of value at another company. So take the chance. But then leaving isn't easy as well. When I left Westpac, as I mentioned, Good Friday, 7th of April, man, there was doubts, there was fears, there was, whoa, hang on a minute. That salary is no longer coming in. What next? My income for the year for my MC is nowhere near what my salary is this year because a lot of the jobs are booked on a short-term basis. And then I thought, well, I could go back and get a job. But I took a step back and went, well, if I went and worked for someone else, happily, but if I did, I'd be working my butt off for 40 hours a week at least, you know, especially in the start to start strong and create a virtuous cycle of success. So if I put that 40 hours a week or more into my business, how successful is that going to be? You know, and I'd encourage everyone who's thinking about this, and I spoke to someone about this the other day, because a lot of people say to me, you know, Luke, how did you do it? How was the journey? Financial independence is really important. So I'd invite people to think about how much money do you have to survive? And let's say, for example, your expenses are with mortgage, kids and everything. Do a budget, understand how much your outgoings are. It's a business. Your life is a business. Right. If your outgoings are $1,000 a month, right? And no one's is unless you're 12 years old. But if you're, for argument's sake, the number's not as important as the example. Your outgoings are $1,000 a month. In total, you can live family, food, mortgage, education, everything for $1,000 a month. If you've got 10 grand in the bank, that's 10 months, give or take, that you've got before you are in the red. So arguably, if you wanted to spend 5 months, half of that time following your dreams, what's the worst thing that could happen? No employer, I believe, is going to frown upon you for saying, I had a fantastic career. My dream was to do this. And over the last 5 months, I've been pursuing that. But for various reasons, A, B, C, D, and E, it failed. Here's the lessons I've learned. I want to add value for the next 3 or 4 years to an organization. And given your point, someone's going to go, well, 3 or 4 years is great. This is how I can do it. Let's rock and roll. You've got yourself financial security again. So the first thing is, A, consider how much money you've got to keep you afloat. Because dreams and aspirations won't put food in the trolley at Coles, in the shopping trolley at Coles. I had someone say to me once, you know, as an MC, you get asked to do a lot of free stuff, and I do a lot of charity stuff on a philanthropic basis. But exposure and goodwill doesn't fill the shopping trolley at Coles, right?
No.
At some point, you need to get paid. And so consider how much money you've got, because if you don't need to stress about money, then you can go all in for a short period of time. And again, my analytical background would suggest that work out what that is, work out how you're going to measure success, and then you're going to need to park whatever it is you used to do on the side. Because if you don't go all in 100% for a period of time, it's not going to work.
Right.
Give it everything you've got. And then you can look back and go, well, I did A, B, C, D, and E, and it didn't work. Probably the second lesson is be accountable. Man, be accountable. Society has become, not in general, but certainly in pockets, so unaccountable for themselves. Yeah. We're in this situation because this person said that. I failed because of this, this, and this, and it wasn't my fault. And yes, a lot of times there are external circumstances that have caused headwinds and made it extremely difficult or caused us to fail. I get that. But always ask yourself, what more can I do? What more could I have done?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
and if you have given everything you have got,
yes,
and it didn't work out, then no regrets. At least you tried, you know?
That's exactly right. No regrets. But then debrief, be critical. One of my university lecturers, Walter Jarvis, is at UTS. He's still there actually, Dr. Jarvis. He'd always say, and this gets back to our comment around sensitive conversations, right?
Yeah.
Be critical with a view to improve.
Yeah, yeah.
Not to destroy. And that's important.
I mean, people say don't be too hard on you, but no, I'm saying don't be too hard, but be critical, right? Yeah. Judging yourself is more important to, to know what exactly gone wrong so that you won't repeat that mistake,
Absolutely. And being honest about it. Like my daughter plays very competitive tennis.
Yeah.
And there are times when, the kids do their own line calls and sometimes they get it wrong, or sometimes there's a let cord, like the ball hits the net and just drops over. That's life. It's the spheres of influence, right? What are the things in your life that you can control? Your attitude, the amount of prep work you did, your effort, the amount of networking, the amount of cold calling you did, whatever it is. You have control over so many things. What don't you control?
Yeah.
In the case of tennis, if the ball hits the net and drops over from the opponent, or if the opponent makes a line call that's questionable, or if the opponent's taking their extra time and wasting, whatever it is, right? I'm using the tennis example. You don't control that. You don't control that. But then there are things which you do control. You can say, well, the ball hit the net twice for me and it didn't go over. Well, then the question is, how hard did you hit it? Because if you give the ball enough speed and it's got enough spin on it, then the propensity for it to go over is more, right? Because it's got more pace if it hits. I mean, that's a very specific example.
Yeah.
But that's a case of saying, I was unlucky, but what more can I do to be successful in the future?
Right.
And I just think as a society, we need to get back to introspective reviewing and debriefing of our situations and saying, yes, I didn't expect interest rates to go up. Yes, my mortgage is now too big and I can't afford it. I probably need to sell. That's not advice, right? But everyone needs to consider their own, And B, did I need a brand new Land Cruiser in the front yard and a $50,000 home theatre system and a 7-bedroom or 6-bedroom or a 5-bedroom home when a 2-bedroom apartment would have done? Interest rates is a great example, right? The cash rate in Australia, the lowest it was from 1990 to 2008 was 4.25%. And that was for 4 months in late 2001. The rest was 4.5%. And clearly it was as high as 16 and 17%. I understand house prices are different. Affordability is different. The economy is different. I get that. I do.
Yeah.
But interest rates aren't at historical highs. 3.85% or whatever the cash rate is nowhere near it used to be, right? Yes, it's high over the past 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, but why did you set to your mind at that level? And in that case, you have to set your mind at a right level, and you have to understand that was a temporary arrangement, Of course, you will complain when something not happens according to your choice. You always complain about it,
It's not fair. I agree. Life isn't fair.
Nothing is fair and unfair. It is just, I always say nothing bad or good. It's all your mindset, what you choose for, so it's always, you have to shift your mind and everything will work out accordingly,
Oh, yeah. It still sucks losing 100 grand or 200 grand on a home that you have to sell. Because, and I know Governor Lowe said some things without going into the RBA example, right? But it's an interesting one. Losing money sucks. There's no doubt about it. But there's always a silver lining.
Yeah.
We're waking up
today.
But
we live in an era where financial becomes so important for people, and that's where actually all the problems starts. But, people find their fulfillment in actually finding all that financial liberation. That is, I think, mental challenge for people. It's more than what the situation is. It's also current people's mental challenge is causing issue. And that's what my personal belief is, So, So coming back to the closer now, before we go, how people can find you for your, where you will be more available?
Yeah, perfect. lukehannan.com.au is the website. I'm sure there is contact details in there. I'm sure we can put that website rather in the chat or in the comments below the video. My business has 3 main pillars: big event hosting, conference hosting, moderation, which is more intimate discussions, and then public speaking training. I'd love to have a chat to anyone who wants to get better at speaking, or just have a chat in general. Give me a call. It's ironic we didn't speak too much about events today, but I think life and entrepreneurship is a fascinating journey, and I'm happy to share my story as to how I got it, the challenges I faced, and I made plenty of mistakes. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah,
and I'm not the most accountable person at times as well, so I'm not preaching saying be more accountable. But I just believe that's the secret sauce, right? Get out there, have a go. lukehannan.com.au is the website. Back to your question, and would love to chat.
Yeah, and all the details will be given below on the description. Don't forget to like, share, and comment, and keep giving your love. Thank you so much for joining in, Luke. Really.
Thank you. Thanks so much.